Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today I am delighted to be joined by an old friend of the show, Matt Cockayne from Yapily. Matt, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Toby. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you?
Very, very good, thanks. Very, very good. Listen, you have had a remarkable story. We've known each other for a long, long time and seen your sort of career develop. I was just saying that a couple of years ago you came in with a fintech book and said that's the journey which I want to take, and ever since then, you've been on a fantastic journey with, culminating with you over at Yapily. It is a fantastic business that's been all over the press of late, and probably one of the darlings of the fintech scene. But for those who may not have heard about you and it so far, give us a quick précis about what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Toby. Lovely to hear such kind words about us. So here at Yapily, we're an open banking connectivity partner. So what that means is the world of open banking and open finance, with every bank and having to present APIs and present their data for consumers and businesses to use. We connect to all those banks, we simplify it, we standardize it, and then we have a single connection that our customers connect to. So we remove all the complexity and all the variation of connecting to those APIs, but equally to maintain them, because the banks are constantly changing the structure and the data that's going through that. So we act as a gateway. We're invisible for our customers. So we're really here to provide the best coverage and the highest quality that we can.
Perfectly put. And it's been one of those incredible sort of spaces at the moment. Open banking is probably the words on the lips of so many people across the sector, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on. What I want to focus in on at the start is what we actually sort of set this up, which is shine a light on some of the companies who are really thriving through this. We've said a number of times in these sessions that there is enough negative press out there for you to find very, very easily, but finding the positive stuff isn't quite so straightforward. And always with a sort of empathetic ear, we've been sort of hearing some of these stories of people who are doing really well through this, and I think that's really important. Yapily have absolutely been one of those businesses, we were talking before about nearly doubling the size of a business during a lockdown is extraordinary, right? And some of the things that you guys have been doing. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about the challenges and some of and why you think it's been going so well for you guys.
Sure, great question. So I think let's step back to kind of just before lockdown. We could see it coming, so we split the company into kind of a red team and a blue team to do alternate weeks in to try to minimise the risk as much as possible. That lasted a full 2 days. And then we all got asked to work from home if we could. As a fintech, all of our stuff sits in the cloud anyway. So literally people had to take their laptop home and they could just continue working. For some people, they didn't have a desk set up at home. So we provided desks, we provided monitors, kind of connectivity pieces. And whilst it was a little challenging to get into, I think the cadence has worked really well. And some of our teams have actually been more productive and tell us that they're more productive doing that than being in the office, especially on the development side of the business. We started to come back. So actually today I'm in the office and most of my commercial team are in today. And I think that kind of cadence will start to pick up. But it brings a whole new set of challenges around onboarding. And as you alluded to, we've significantly grown. So I think our headcount's increased by about 70, 80% from where we were on the day of lockdown to where we are now. Last week, 5 people joined, for example, of which 4 were women, which was great, because in tech, it's really hard to find, to get that balance. Whether it's around gender or whether it's around kind of ethnic background, it's really hard to get that balance. So we're trying to push forward on that side. But onboarding people remotely is a completely different challenge if you haven't been set up for it. And as kind of a small kind of startup that's scaling, we've all been used to being with each other all the time. So that osmosis and that knowledge transfer is much easier when you're doing it in person. Doing it remotely via kind of Zoom calls or Hangouts calls, or whichever tool you have. I have the full selection installed now because all of my customers use it. So I have the full suite installed.
They do that, don't they?
They do. So that's been a little bit tricky, but I think we've got the cadence working there. But now we're actually seeing people wanting to come back more to the office. So we've run a few surveys around what do you want to do? How productive are you? Would you like more flexibility when we start to come back to the office and we kind of get to that new normal world? We ran one a month or so ago. We've just actually run another one. And we're seeing quite high participation surveys, which is good from the team. But equally, it's around people are wanting more flexibility. I don't think anyone wants to go back to being in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when you see some of the transformational changes, like Microsoft saying, oh, well, we've seen basically 5 years digital transformation in like a month. And like you see in the States that on like e-commerce transactions had kind of for the last 10 years have gone up about 3%, and then in 4 weeks it went up by 15% of total spend.
Isn't it?
But it's extraordinary some of the changes you're seeing, and a lot of companies have been very reluctant to give flexibility around working. They've been kind of, while they talk about it, they've still wanted people in the office for certain times, showing their face. And for some people, that doesn't work as well as actually just sitting down and working on their own and delivering their activities. However, we're seeing everybody in our team wants to come into the office at some point. Some of them maybe only want to come in 1 or 2 days a week. Some want to come in 4 days a week. But I think it's providing that flexibility, but also providing an office space that actually works for that dynamic. So if teams want to come in and kind of spend a day solving a particular challenge, actually having the workspace that enables them to do that. So because of our growth, we've actually run out of space. So if everyone tomorrow said, I want to come back, we're probably 20 or 30 desks short on what we have versus what we can support. So we need to get a new space anyway that we can go to that will actually support us in that piece. And it's about finding what does that look like that actually allows people to be most productive in the way that they come in, and so actually makes coming to the office valuable. Because obviously we still have the commute and all those pieces that go with it. But providing that workspace and providing that culture that actually supports them, I think, is really important.
It's interesting about that workspace, isn't it? Because this is, as you alluded to before, completely unprecedented. So, we've rapidly innovated and emerged and done a completely different way of work for everyone. And I know your background is very traditional, probably in the office environment and such like. And we're all learning very rapid lessons on all of that. Tell us some of the things that you've learned about how best to do that and how you see it moving further forward. Because you say that 20, 30 desks, if everyone comes in at the same sort of day, how are you scheduling that? How are you managing that? What can people learn from your approach to it?
Today we have the really advanced concept of a Google spreadsheet that has a list of, so in kind of the 2 meter rule, we have 30 something desks. We put 15 spaces and you can sign up if you want to come in. And you can also see who else is going to be coming in. So we have that. Now it's about kind of how do we work most effectively, and what do we need from different teams? So like a commercial team are more likely to need to be in the office to go and visit clients. But equally, the world of kind of sales, of having to actually physically go and see people to have a productive meeting, I think has been shown that we don't need to do that, at least for every meeting. You still need that personal connection. You still need to build that rapport. So I don't think during a sort of typical sales cycle, you'll completely drop the personal, meeting people face to face. But it does mean, I think, with Zoom and everything, that you don't have to go to see them every time in person. And like, for me, my diary is cleared up to some extent, that I don't have to spend time trekking around London. I mean, it's great to go and see customers. It's great to go and speak to the market and to understand what people are looking for and how they perceive us. But equally, trekking over to Paddington or going to Canary Wharf from the city, it just, each of those kind of half-hour trips just fill up a lot of your day. And
Absolutely.
Now not having to do it. Luckily, everyone's now just filling in Zoom meetings. So I just find myself back on video calls, which is a different dynamic. I mean, I think we found from the industry that a lot of fintech firms are kind of hunkering down a little bit. And so from our side, it's been I hate to say it, but it's been quite beneficial. And in fact, that we managed to close our funding round early in the COVID process. So we'd done a lot of work on that piece already. So we announced that at the beginning of April.
Yeah.
And that's then given us kind of a bit of PR and coverage that when we're looking to scale the team, we've had lots of good quality individuals want to come and work for us because they've heard about us and they're excited by the journey that we're on. And I think closing that cash during the lockdown was quite an achievement. Not quite the achievement someone like Checkout.com earlier this week closing another 150 million, but they're at a different scale of company to where we are.
Yeah. You're on the journey.
You're on the journey, and that whole open banking space is exploding. I mean, MasterCard announced they're acquiring Finicity in the States this week. Plaid are obviously being bought by Visa. So large firms are now coming into this space because they're seeing where the world is going, and this is a key component of the future financial services market.
I agree with that, and I'm really interested in what you're talking, because it is a challenge, and there's loads of, one of the things I've been speaking to a lot of VC and PE companies and people with it, within them. And there's money there for sure, but that money is difficult to obtain these days, and they aren't spending, potentially as wildly as they were before. Tell us about some of the things you learned and heard and saw, and why you think that people were so willing to put significant back into the business during that sort of time, because it's bold, right?
Yeah, it is. I think it comes down to clarity of what you're trying to do. It's the first thing. Lots of small firms, you can kind of try and drain the ocean. There's so many problems you can fix. There's so much opportunity in kind of a legacy world that you as a fintech can go, we could do all of these things. But actually, you've got to be laser focused about what you're trying to do. I think that clarity comes then through when you go and have the meetings with the VCs about, as a kind of executive team, what are we trying to do? And does everyone on message with the same thing? Not just saying the right thing, but do we believe that's the right thing? So there's a great opportunity that we could do loads more with the data. We could build enrichment engines, we could build income assessments, we could build like PFM type solutions with the data. But actually, is that what our specialism is? Because there's some great firms who already do those type of things. Is that really what we want to focus on? So I think for us, it's about, we are focused on the best quality API connectivity we can have and the broadest coverage. So last week we announced we're in Germany. We're already live with full market coverage in Italy. We're already live in Ireland. So those countries are kind of adding on as we scale the team. By the end of the summer, we'll have most of Europe covered. And that, when we speak to customers, ideally they're looking to rationalize down the number of vendors they're working with. So if one firm can provide coverage in all the markets they're looking to work with, they'll work with that firm. Whereas previously they might have worked with a different firm in each market. So I think for us, when we're looking to raise, it was around what are we actually crisply focused on? What's our go-to-market strategy? And have we explained that clearly? And we had to go through a couple of iterations of that, because that's just natural, I think, to some extent, of kind of, this is what we think we're going to do. Then you get asked questions back by different firms of, have you thought about this? And it just puts a different lens on it. And Lakestar led our recent round. We had quite a few sessions with them before we got to that point. And it's useful to have those discussions, because VCs will see lots of people in the same marketplace. So they probably get the same story from multiple firms, but then it's about, how are you looking to execute on that? Are you clear about what you're trying to achieve? And can you show me how you've done it so far? And kind of, so that's now, we had a strategy session in our commercial team last week, and I realized that only 3 of us were here at the beginning of March. So like the other 2/3 of my commercial team have joined since the beginning of March. Now, a couple of them joined like the week before lockdown. Everyone else has either joined during lockdown or just before it kicked in. So actually getting them on board on the strategy we're trying to achieve is quite important. And that's kind of a bit why most of my team are in today, because we're going to have another follow-up on that, so we can talk about it. I think people are becoming more comfortable at coming back into the office as we're coming out of the lockdown piece. And that's the economy sort of slowly restarts. Although annoyingly, none of the pubs are open yet around here.
Not long,
hopefully.
I know that there is an outside bar at the top of Cannon Street if you get that thirsty. So I'll be there tomorrow if you need to see me. I think there's an interesting leadership point on that, and we've had, over the years, many for me fascinating conversations with you about your philosophies on a lot of this. This has got to be a completely different challenge for you, and I know you've led international teams, which on a global scale, which is had similar sort of things. But this is when you're talking there about 2/3 of your team who you haven't necessarily really got to know and meet and bond with and such like. Tell us about some of the challenges around that and how you dealt with that this time.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because you always schedule meetings to talk about specific topics, and you find your whole days are talked about that. But actually, you don't get to talk about the random questions that come up when someone says, "I've just spoken to this customer. They asked me this. How would you handle it? This is how I did it." So it's those type of things, and we're actually now looking at putting some tech in place that actually enables us to be a bit more collaborative. So we're already on Salesforce platform, but it's people that sit on top of that. So there's like some tools around recording calls and using AI to analyze them to see what was good and what was bad against like other examples of that. So we'll deploy that type of stuff, and more reminder tools and kind of contact generation tools. So there's a bunch of things that we need to do to make us a bit more effective whilst we're all remote. But equally, I think it's about actually when I have one-to-ones with people, we don't just talk about like deals or marketing. We actually try and talk about what they're doing. So from our team, we have a daily stand-up, and everyone just talks about what they're up to that day, what the blockers are, where anyone else can help. But we also try and do like a joke of the day. Now, I'd have to say the quality of the jokes is very low, but
I've got to ask you what the best one you've heard is. Or is it non-repeat? Is it
Probably not
non-repeat?
repeat. Probably not repeat outside a commercial team for a public broadcast event. But like some of them are very short and to the point. Some of them are quite long-winded. But it's just trying to get a bit of a dynamic. And we have, as a company, we have kind of a Friday stand-up that we always used to do in person, and we now do remotely. Everyone's encouraged to have a drink of their choice, whether that's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and just to kind of, and we kind of, as a business, as a leadership team, we talk through what's happening in the business by teams. And then in my team, we've done things like Friday beers, and within the wider business, my head of marketing and I ran a quiz for the teams. So we put them into teams. We ran a general knowledge quiz, which the funniest part of that was that both our CEO and CTO had to be explained to them that you're not meant to use Google to cheat when you're doing it. And I'm quite happy to go on record with that. Maybe it's the fact they're not British. They don't get the etiquette of doing that. There was
it sort of defeats the object a little bit, doesn't
it? When that was explained.
It is. You definitely see into the soul of people through an online quiz, don't you?
You do. So I think it's kind of trying to do as many of those things that are not just about work. Because if you only ever talk to each other about work, it becomes quite a dry conversation. So how do you try to engage those things? How do you try to understand what are the dynamics people are going through? And I think it's like the tools are useful to that extent, but equally just picking up the phone. I'm still quite old school, as you alluded to, around the block a little bit. So I always prefer to call someone. If someone tried to Slack call me, I've got to unplug stuff to get it to work. Just pick up the phone and actually call me. And let's just have a conversation about something, rather than messaging me on an instant message.
Yeah, I think that's you know, the quite often I think this has been one of the most important things. I've enjoyed having the ability to have Zooms and see people face to face instead. You know, it's the next best thing, isn't it? But actually, sort of pacing around and having a good chat with people and doing all that, and actually moving away from some of the day to day is interesting. One of the things that's really I guess been a challenge for every leader through all of this is the undulating emotions of people who've got all sorts of different things going on. And you know, you like I will have people who are in 1-bedroom flats on their own, and you have people there who are there in the bosom of their families, and both of them have challenges, right, for different reasons. And judging the mood of the team and who's struggling and who's not struggling, because I think at every single stage, all of us at some time have had you know, some sort of concern on our shoulders and such like. Tell us a little bit about how you've managed that.
So yeah, I mean, the mental health aspect it's one of those things that is slowly becoming more talked about in the corporate world. And I wouldn't say I live in the corporate world anymore, but like in the working world, mental health is becoming one of the things that's actually becoming acceptable to talk about. I've always been about talking about it, but maybe people haven't been as open as they wanted to be in how they respond to it. It's always tricky if you're kind of the VP or the C-suite someone. You have to try to invest that time so that someone will actually have that conversation with me. I mean, I'm a chief commercial officer, but nearly everyone in the team works for me because we're very flat in our structure. So having one of my new grads, having the confidence to come and talk to me about it and empowering them enough that they can come and do that, I think is really important. And like trying to talk to people about, are you okay? Is there anything else we can help you with? Do you want to come into the office and talk? Because quite a few of our team live in East London and kind of we're in Liverpool Street, so they can walk to the office or they can jump on a Boris bike. So it's actually easier for them to get into the office. And they're kind of wanting to spend a bit of time with other people because some of them are either stuck with just their flatmates or they're living alone, and that's a different challenge. I had the joy of nearly 3 months of a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, 24/7. And I love my family, but that was a little bit much for all of us. So the fact they've gone back to school and gone back to nursery is actually put a bit of calm and a bit of normality to some extent in our household. And it's a tricky time for everybody. And like even for my 5-year-old, he was struggling with not seeing his mates. And having to hang out with his parents and his annoying 2-year-old brother. And like his behavior was struggling as a part of that. So it's impacted everybody. But I think it's trying to be aware about that and how do we help you and how do we support you through that journey to try to make sure that you can still deliver your job effectively. But equally, when we come back to the office, you haven't regressed into something different and you don't want to come. So I think a lot of people are still quite scared and don't want to come back to the office and don't want to go on public transport. I personally am a little bit on the other side, and I think I had the bug before lockdown kicked in. I just didn't recognise the symptoms at the time. So it's how do you help those? If I haven't waffled too long, I think it's how do you help those guys and girls and actually give them the power, empower them enough that they can ask those awkward questions.
Yeah. So you touched on an awkward aspect of all this. Just then, look we're filming this at the end of June. Start of July, a further chunk of the economy opens up, and people sort of press to it. As you highlight, there are people there who are very keen to come back into the office, and there's people there who are less so. How do you deal with that? I mean, there's going to be people there whose arms will be twisted in some companies to going in and not be happy about it, and the engagement issues around that are going to be huge. There's going to be people there who unquestionably take advantage of the situation at the same sort of stage and don't come in not from any fear but through laziness, for want of a better expression. And there's going to be people there who are who generally shouldn't be pushed back into it for also shielding or whatever sort of reason for it. Is it a by case basis? Is there encouragement? As you say, you've got the vast majority of your commercial team in today. Are all of them absolutely happy to be coming back in, or have you had to work?
Yeah, I mean, one of the guys got a taxi in because he didn't want to get public transport. A few people cycled in. I cycle to work. It's the only exercise I get to do these days. Other people got the tube, and they said the tubes were empty. So as a company, we took the decision probably a month ago that we would say to people, right, you don't need to come back into the office. It's open. If you want to come in, you're more than welcome to. But until September, and we're kind of reviewing it on quite a regular basis, till September, we don't expect you to be in the office.
Yeah.
So quite a few of the team kind of rented and actually gone, I don't like this. I'm going to go back and live with my parents or live with some friends somewhere else. So they've actually gone out of London. We've said that's actually fine. So one guy's gone back to Greece. Someone's gone to Italy. One of my commercial teams, she's gone back to Sweden. So they've done that. And we've just said, look, as of today, we're likely to be back in at the beginning of September in a more normal world, but we'll assess that as we go through on a regular basis. And that's kind of the view we've taken. So we're not forcing anyone in. I mean, I think as an employer, there's always that risk today. But if you try to force someone in and they catch the bug and they get complications, are you liable for that? So from our side, it's about everyone's an adult to some extent, and they can all make their own decisions. So we're saying to them, if you want to come to the office and you want to see other people, you're more than welcome to. The office is open 24/7. Come in. If, however, you're more comfortable staying at home, stay at home. If you want to mix and match, mix and match. So like there were 4 of us in on Tuesday, for example, and there's 12 of us in today. It's great, and it's actually lovely to see people again. I'm quite an extrovert, so the hardest part for me of lockdown has actually not been spending time with other people and just talking to them and having that sort of human contact, because much as a Zoom call is lovely, it's not the same as sitting across the table with someone talking about stuff. And just talking about the rugby or talking about their weekends or whatever it is.
Or the lack of rugby at the moment.
Oh, the lack of rugby, yeah. But hey, we got
a bit out in New Zealand, so we're okay.
That's a whole separate conversation. So I think it's about kind of looking at the data on a regular basis, and we have a lot of European clients. I speak to people in Berlin, I speak to people in Paris. They've all gone back. Our economy is fully open. 90% of their teams are back in. A couple of people are not because they're either shielding or they're not comfortable with it. So I think it's about, again, that kind of empowerment and treating people as adults and saying, look, you can make your own risk-based decision. Here's the information we know today. Here's the government guidance. If you want to come in, come in. If you want to stay at home, stay at home. I think it's harder if you're working in your own bedroom and you maybe don't enjoy it as much, or it's a noisy area or whatever. Maybe you're not finding it productive. You want to come into the office. Or if, like me today, Virgin Media has gone down across London, I discovered. Had I been home, I wouldn't even be able to do that. So I think it's about those pieces and letting people make their own decisions. We're not forcing anyone in, but I think by September we will probably be a little bit back more to normal.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think it's sort of evolving ever more rapidly, isn't it? And naturally everyone's got the sort of concerns about secondary spikes and all this sort of stuff, but I think there's a growing confidence, and look, we started coming back in last week. I've done 3 days a week over and seen people come in at various different levels. Last Friday there was a good bunch of us in, and immediately that sort of esprit de corps that you get from working among other people was very noticeable and palpable. It's good fun to do that. So I think exactly as you say, give people the confidence and choice to do it at their own speed, and make sure everyone's set up to be as practical as possible for it. Matt, there's so much I want to talk to you about, and I'm pretty convinced that a good idea on this would be to build in another episode and talk actually about your specialist subject, because I think there's so much going on in open banking that I really want to sort of get your take on, and the future of that and the opportunities within that. That is a complete whole nother show that we've got to do. I'd love to sort of book something in to do that with you in the next month or two as well. In the short term, though, I think having this focus on opportunities and positives through it, I want to say a massive well done to you, Stefano, and the whole team there for doing something which I think is genuinely spectacular all the way through this. What I also think is particularly incredible through this is just the background of that. When you talk about VCs looking at teams and investments around that, this is a team that is whilst incredibly experienced, actually, and what you've built from the business has been from a collective who haven't necessarily done this before in this sort of space. Tell us a little bit about the lessons on that, and how and why that's worked so well.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, look, I joined. It's actually just been just over a year since I've been at Yapily, and
right? That's gone quick.
I was number 12 in the firm. We're now at 60 odd. So it's that kind of exponential growth. But I think as a management team, you all got different experiences that you're bringing in, and then it's trying to find the ways of working that work effectively for you. And there's always that kind of storming, forming, norming, performing piece that you go through, and we've definitely had some of that. But equally, it's about trying to, and open banking is still quite a new market. So what we tried at this point, like in June last year, we wouldn't try again now, but we had to go through that process to learn it. There's always that kind of price discovery piece you have to go through, but equally, what do customers want and what's the prioritization? Like coming back to that kind of laser focus of stuff. There's so much we could do, and there's so many requests from different customers and the market. But you've got to be absolutely brutal about the prioritization of that stuff. Because otherwise you get stuck with huge product backlogs, and you're kind of doing incremental releases that don't actually add together. So it's about actually being laser focused on that. So effectively, we have a CTO, we have a head of product, and we have Stefano as the CEO kind of overseeing it, and myself. And it's about how do we work effectively. So as a management team, we actually have daily stand-ups as well. So I have that before my commercial calls. So we have like twice a week management meetings, because there's so much to talk about. And it's actually, to start with, that was quite an interesting dynamic, because we hadn't spent that much time with each other on a daily basis. It was kind of much more one-to-one and point discussions. So the way of working has improved there. And I think it's around how do we make sure that we're hiring the right quality across the teams? And how do we make sure, as we scale, that everyone's doing the right thing? Because like when you're a 12-person firm, you know what everyone's doing to the second of their day. When you're a 60-person firm, it's just impossible. And when we're a 100-person firm, it'll be even harder. So it's about the ways of working, about how we put structure and empower people in there. I mean, you don't want to have the kind of full corporate structure of just committees and all this stuff, but equally you might have a free fall. So it's about finding a happy place between them. We're pretty agile and pretty fast-paced moving as a firm. I hope we never get to the place where we have to have committees to make decisions on projects and stuff. It'll probably happen at some point, but I'll avoid that as much as I possibly can.
I think it's great. Look, it's one thing that's noticeable over the last year is just how happy you've been, and seeing that sort of passion and enthusiasm and excitement about everything you do. Look, you've always been someone who's sort of worn your heart on your sleeve a little bit, but to genuinely see someone who's super passionate and super confident about the growth of the business has been brilliant. Speaking of that growth of the business, so many things you've got to do. Who do you want to hear from at the moment? Who's useful to? Who should be talking to you? And how do they get in touch with you?
So I think that's a really good question. I think the key people, product owners. Do you want to have a great product? Do you want to use open banking? Do you want to have the smoothest flow? Do you want to have the easiest onboarding for your customers? If so, come and speak to us. Or if you're a technologist and you're looking at open banking and you're deciding about build versus buy, come and talk to us. We'll show you how simple it is to use us, but equally how complicated it is if you try and do it yourself.
Brilliant. And get in touch through the website, get in touch through LinkedIn with you, I presume?
Yeah, get in touch through LinkedIn. My LinkedIn has, since I've been at Yapily, my LinkedIn has kind of tripled in the number of connections I have. I think you take a different view at it compared to when you work at a big corporate. So like engagement on LinkedIn is great. email me. It's just matt.cockayne@Yapily, or come by you guys as well. I'll happily speak to anybody about this.
Good man. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom as always today. It's a pleasure, as always, to speak to you. You're going to come back and tell us a little bit more about the open banking world in another show?
Absolutely, I'd love to, Toby.
Great stuff. Listen, thanks for doing it. Thanks for sharing. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Matt, thanks ever so much.
Thanks for having me.